Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to the Stop Overthinking podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about sleep and how to get better sleep. I'm excited to bring Dr. Darley into this conversation. She's an expert in using natural, behavioral, and lifestyle medicine for the treatment of sleep disorders. And so we have a great conversation planned that can help you maybe get out of that racing mind and be able to fall asleep better, get better quality sleep, and how to create some habits that will get you more rested. So welcome, Dr. Darley, and please expand a little bit more about yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. My whole adult life, I have spent working in sleep medicine. My work over the last 20 years has been one-on-one with patients, and now I'm segueing more into online courses. One of my missions for my career is to uplift the sleep of America, and that is hard to do when you're only working one-to-one. So I'm trying to work with larger groups of people and just really provide the sleep skills that people need to really thrive. And sleep is one of those things, it's foundational, but yet it doesn't get covered a lot in health classes and some of that early life education. We have to seek it out as adults.
Yes, absolutely. And I've talked a little bit with my listeners, but also with my clients as well, that I really make an effort in my household and with myself and have for several years about sleep and just recognizing how vital it is to all aspects of our health. I was in the fitness industry for many years as well, and recognizing the importance of rest and sleep to be able to build muscle, to lose weight, and that aspect. But also then with kids, and my son has ADD, and I can also recognize how important sleep is for different aspects of his behavior then as well, like all children. Yes, excited to talk about this. So a lot of my listeners have a hard time falling asleep. Like it's hard to unwind. They're busy, they're working, they're moms, they've got probably some anxiety or just overthinking. And so let's talk about getting ready for bed even before we get to trying to fall asleep. And
Yeah,
what can we do to improve that?
Pardon me?
What can we do to improve that process?
Yes, so I think about it in two ways. One is we need to be physiologically sleepy. And that's one of the things that has really shifted for human beings over the last, say, 30 years or so, is that we just don't have the physical environment that allows us to feel drowsy before we get into bed. You mentioned blue light, and I think most people have heard about blue light, but they don't necessarily understand how big of a difference it can make. So I'd like to talk about that strategy first. In the natural light environment, which is sunlight and sunset and darkness, we have this melatonin system that as the sun goes down, our melatonin can start to rise. And melatonin in the brain helps us feel drowsy. But now with blue light, electric light in our homes, our melatonin is still at 0 because the light is bright enough to suppress our melatonin. So it's not until we get into the bed and turn the lights out and close our eyes that our melatonin can even start to rise. So we don't have this physiological system for drowsiness turned on at bedtime like we need it to be. And I think that there is education around blue light, but people just don't know how very sensitive the system is. to give an example, a really easy test is if you hold your hand out arm's distance and you can see your fingers wiggling, that is enough to suppress your melatonin. It is a super sensitive system. So I'm a big fan. So the recommendation is to have less than 10 candle flame of light for 3 hours before bed, which, like you said, many people are still in the very busy, task-oriented part of their day, 3 hours before bed. So I'm a big believer in people using blue blocking glasses. If you're getting blue blocking glasses, they should definitely have a reddish orange lens to them. That's a tip. There are some that are sold as blue blockers, but they don't have this reddish lens, and they're not going to work well enough for you. So put these on for 2 hours before bed. That will really help your melatonin be increased by the time you get into bed, and that will solve part of the problem in and of itself, because you'll actually be physiologically sleepy.
Mhm. Yes. And I have some as well. Mine are more of an orangey lens, and my kids make fun of me. And even so, blue blocking glasses, absolutely. And we want to have the tinted lenses just in general, because there's some that I see online for $20 and there's some that I see for $200. Is there really a difference? And what is that difference for people?
Yeah, there are. I have two pairs. I have a $17 pair and I have a $200 pair. And the $200 pair has clip-on gradation, so you can wear the lighter ones for computer use in the day and the darker ones at night. So long as they have the reddish lens and they are billed as blue blocking glasses, they should have some effect. There's other features often of the more expensive ones, but I think, if it's $20 blue blocking glasses or none, because obviously $200 is an investment, go for the $20 ones, and it's going to make some impact. The thing about the blue blockers is for people who have insomnia, for people who have what's called delayed sleep-wake phase, which is being an extreme night owl, wearing these for just a week or two for 2 hours before bed, usually in most studies, there haven't been a lot of studies, but in the studies that we do have, it causes people to fall asleep much earlier, like an hour or two earlier falling asleep, which that's golden. That's a huge impact.
Yes.
So I think it's well worth trying.
Okay, so go get yourself some blue light blocking glasses if you're not wearing those already. What else can people do to prime themselves for sleep? So we've talked about blue light. Are there
Right.
other things to kind of slow that brain down and fall asleep better and more quickly?
Right. So once you're allowing yourself to feel drowsy, then there's, I think, limit setting and setting boundaries. One of the trends I've noticed in our culture over the last 4 or 5 years is that discussion of boundaries and setting your boundaries of what does work for you and what doesn't work for you. And I love that conversation. And I think that it's very relevant for our sleep. As women, we're often working outside the home and then having primary responsibility in the home for the childcare and running the household and all that. And it ends up being a lot of hours. But to approach bedtime with the idea that I'm going to set some boundaries around my rest, that I'm not going to take my thoughts or my planning to bed with me. And so the strategy that I love for people to use, and almost everybody tells me that this works well, is to set your phone alarm for an hour before bed. And at that time, take 5 to 10 minutes, not any longer than that, to purge your thoughts from your mind onto the paper. And it could be planning, your to-do list, or a, problem solution brainstorming chart. It could be full sentence narrative, diary like writing about your feelings, or that conversation that you wish had gone differently, those kinds of things that come up. And attention that I'm going to put these thoughts here on this paper, and then I am going to rest, and then I can pick up this stuff tomorrow. But it's kind of like, enough already. I need to set the boundary that I am getting the sleep that I need and the rest so that I'm ready for the next day. And I do want to give acknowledgement that there are times in life that we have to care for other people in the middle of the night, whether they're children or sick adults or elders or whatnot. So, that is a real responsibility. But the thinking things through, you want to create some time earlier in the evening,
Yes.
and I think it's a skill. It's a skill to learn, okay, what are the most intrusive thoughts? And then it's a skill to really set them aside. So once you've processed your thoughts at night, there's 2 more steps. One is, if your mind starts going in the night, to have a phrase that really hits your heart, is true for you, and is effective. The one that I use is, I already thought about that. I will have time tomorrow. Now's my time to rest. I think, doing some kind of harsh statement of blame, of why am I thinking about this, or it's stupid that I'm still thinking about this, like, don't go there. There's a reason you're having those thoughts, but just acknowledge that now's not the time, right? And there's so many things in life as moms, as women, that people approach us and say, Mom, will you help me with such and such? And you say, I will help you, but not right now. And it's kind of the same thing. And then the last part of the strategy is to have something sleep promoting that you're going to do. You've kicked your thoughts out of bed. What are you going to do to help yourself fall asleep? You could do a gratitude practice of some kind. You could do, if you find like you're tossing and turning, you could do progressive muscle relaxation, where you tighten your toes for a count of 7, let them relax, fall heavy in the bed, and just slowly move up your body. I love that one because it engages both your body and your mind.
Yes.
You can, another strategy that I love and that I personally use is to have a bedtime story that you either have made up, or a book that you read, something sweet, not thought-provoking, kind of just a story of someone's day. And if you realize you're awake in bed, you just start at the beginning of the story and just kind of slowly recite it to yourself and fall asleep that way. So
Yeah.
lots of strategies that you can use to
Yes,
help yourself.
perfect. Yeah, and I really like those suggestions, and it's often what I talk to clients about as well, just being able to kind of unload your brain, and it doesn't matter what you're writing. Yeah, it doesn't have to be in sentences, just get it out. That can certainly be helpful for a few minutes before bed as well. And
Pick it up tomorrow, and now is my time to rest.
yes. Yes, and I really like that as well, because I think most of us recognize that trying to solve problems in the middle of the night is generally not very effective, and also causes more problems with our sleep and not having restful sleep. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what happens when we don't get the sleep that we need, and why is it a problem?
Yeah, I really think about poor sleep as a quality of life issue, because it translates into being impaired in many different ways. I think about it as 5 domains. We've got our physical health and our mental health deteriorate with sleep problems. Our physical performance, like driving, and if you're doing any kind of job where you have potential for injury, workplace injuries increase if someone is sleep deprived. And then cognitive performance, everything from my remembering your name, Kristen, to complex problem solving, taking the world of sleep medicine and winnowing it down into a conversation that's useful for people. That's complex problem solving. And then emotional intelligence and our ability to get along well with others. And that last one is an area I wish we had more discussion around, because so much of our quality of life is really impacted by how well we're able to get along with others, either in our home environment or work or out in the community. And what we know is that when a person is sleep deprived, it's about 36% of Americans who are not getting adequate sleep. So this is going to be true for them. When a person is sleep deprived, they're not able to be aware of other people's emotions, and they're not going to be able to control their impulses. And like they might blurt out something insensitive or hurtful. And they're not also going to be more self-centered in their reasoning and just not as caring and kind to others when they're sleep deprived. And, your friends and family and coworkers are probably going to give you some grace once or twice, but if that's your way of being in the world because you're chronically sleep deprived, it's going to cause some, potentially significant harm to your relationships.
Yes.
And that in itself, I think, is a wonderful motivator to get the sleep we need every night.
Yes, and I wholeheartedly agree. And this is a perfect platform on this podcast to talk more about those emotional connections along with the physical. So you've used the term sleep deprived a couple of times, or what's the criteria for being sleep deprived?
So someone's sleep deprived if they could sleep longer than they are sleeping. And this little alarm clock, I know this is very old school that I have a battery powered alarm clock, or if you're using your phone as your alarm clock, that's a sign that you're not getting enough sleep. If your sleep is truncated like that, you're not getting adequate sleep. And we bandy about this 8 hours, right?
Mhm.
But I'd like to give a little bit more information to
Please.
help people. We think of the bell curve of how much sleep adults need as typically 7 to 9 hours. But that doesn't mean that all human adults, so long as they get 7 hours, are going to be fine. It really is a bell curve. So maybe 10-15% of human adults need 7 hours. Closer to 50% need 8, and then another 15% need 9. And what's really helpful is for an individual to figure out, okay, where do I fall on this bell curve? Because if you need 8.25 hours and you're getting 7, you're going to have all the deficits in those 5 domains that I mentioned. Even though to your neighbors, to you yourself, it might sound like, oh, well, I'm getting the recommended amount, so I should be fine. Just think about it like any measure of human beings. We fall on a bell curve for height, bell curve for eye color, and so a great way for people to figure out how much sleep they need. Well, there's several ways. One is to wake up without an alarm for 10 days and see how much sleep you're getting. Another indicator that you might not be getting, that you're not getting enough sleep, is if you're sleeping longer on your days off than you are on work days. That's absolutely a sign that you're not getting adequate sleep. And then, of course, your level of sleepiness. If you are feeling like you absolutely have to take a nap, or worst case, you're falling asleep inadvertently, those would be signs that you're not getting adequate sleep.
Yes. And I am one, and my daughter as well, that we are on the higher end of that spectrum, closer to the 8 to 9 hours of sleep. And one thing I've noticed, I have a smartwatch that will, give me some insight into sleep. I'm sure it's not perfectly accurate, but what I also noticed in using it is, even though, say, I'm in bed thinking that I'm asleep for 8 hours, it's telling me, no, you were really asleep for about 7 hours and 25 minutes, for example. And so that's something I've had to recognize, that being in bed, or even thinking that I'm closing my eyes from this time to this time, I have to give myself even more room for whatever reason. That maybe it's that I'm restless, or it takes me longer to fall asleep. Perimenopause issues for me, coming in, that I'm just more restless. But I know that just being in bed I can't consider that I'm getting, that much sleep as well.
Sure, right. We'll need a little bit, half an hour more time in bed than we get sleep or so. That would be like a healthy ratio.
Yeah. So when we are in bed and we hear all sorts of things about, having a dark room and the right temperature and some of those things, does that really make a difference for quality of sleep?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad that you asked that because, for whatever your work or your profession is, we all like do some training, whether it's school or on the job training or whatever. And then once we start our job, there's things that we learn while we're doing our job. And I think one of the most striking things, once I started working with people to improve their sleep, is how many people have something in their bedroom environment that bugs them, that disturbs their sleep, that just isn't the right setting for them. And I really want to empower people to do a bedroom review. Maybe it'll take, I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Yeah, I mean, it'll take less to think through, and then change around the stuff that doesn't work for you, because you want your bedroom environment to be really optimal and not be a disturbance. So dark, it should be so dark that you can't see your fingers wiggling when you hold your hand out arm's length. So for many people, that means you may need to get blackout fabric or blackout curtains to put over the windows. There may be little annoying LED lights that you can use tape to put over. I like to use that black electrical tape, and actually when I'm traveling, I take some with me to, like, all the annoying LED lights, turn the clock to the wall if it has a display. And people sleep better when it's a cooler temperature, cooler than 65 or 18°C. And if you're waking up too hot, you definitely want to adjust the thermostat. And also, instead of having one thick duvet, a great strategy is to have maybe 3 thinner blankets that you can peel off and really fine tune so that you're not getting too hot. There's this level at which you're so hot that you're aware of it, and there's a lower set point where it's so hot that it's disturbing your sleep, but you're just not aware of it yet. And we want to be below that level. And mattresses should be comfortable. One thing that people often ask about is how often should they be cleaning their bed and their bedding and whatnot. So I'll just give those recommendations. Sheets and pillowcases washed weekly in hot water. All other fabric in the bedroom, from dust ruffle, mattress pad, blankets, curtains, any table runners, all of that every 3 months. And pillows replaced every 2 years. One strategy I like to do is when we get a new pillow is I just put the date on it, the month and the year, with my permanent marker. And then every time we change the pillowcases, I could see the date and I know when they need to be changed out. And just at that 3-month mark, when you're cleaning all of the fabric, to deep clean underneath furniture and clean any level or type blinds and do all of that.
Okay. And I appreciate the comment too about just for the temperature and having multiple layers. And that seems so easy and commonsensical, but I know for so many people, especially if you're sleeping with a partner or another person in the bed, and maybe one person likes it hotter or cooler, and so, or just body heat from the other person, that often it can be that you're not exactly on the same page. But yes, having those layers to be able to find what you need, just being a little bit more proactive in pursuing that then as well.
Yes, and I want to give a tip that if you find you're cold when you get into bed because it's winter or whatnot, but then you're waking up too hot later on, a really nice strategy can be to use a heating pad or a hot water bottle or something on your side of the bed, half an hour before you get into bed so that it's warm enough that you don't have to have excessive covers that wake you up later. And then, of course, turn it off when you get into bed. That can be a really nice strategy to make it comfortable to get into a bed that has fewer blankets that you want to have for later on.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense too. Perfect. We talked a little bit about, what happened with, not getting enough sleep, but one part we didn't talk on that I want to make sure we hit is just being anxious and how anxiety can increase. So we talked a little bit with that emotional intelligence and the impulsiveness, but I do just want to pivot and make sure we hit on that because so many of the people listening to this podcast are struggling in one form or another with some anxiety. And so we don't want them to stress even more about sleeping and what they're doing wrong. But so taking a couple of these strategies, yeah, just the correlation again between sleep and anxiety.
Yeah, so when a person is sleep deprived, they are going to have increased anxiety. So for anybody who has anxiety, I think the first thing to look at is, am I shortening my sleep with an alarm clock? And if so, how can I increase my sleep totals? That is a good way to go. Unfortunately, it is a little bidirectional that people who have anxiety are more likely to have insomnia. So I want to let people know that if you have both anxiety and insomnia, you want to do some treatments that are focused on the anxiety, but also some treatments that are focused for the insomnia. And the recommended first-line treatment for insomnia, generally speaking, is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And you would get that kind of treatment. It's usually around 6 appointments over maybe 8 weeks. You would get that from a behavioral sleep specialist. And there's a great website I love to give people, behavioralsleep.org. And it has a provider tab. So you can just click on provider tab, you select your country, you select your state, and you'll be able to find providers, specialists in this technique for insomnia there in your area. And that is a great resource. And sometimes people who have anxiety and have sleep problems are thinking more, well, when I get my anxiety handled, my sleep is automatically going to improve. And so I don't need to do something that's sleep focused. And I would really encourage you to it's a two-sided equation. You want to also focus on this sleep independently too.
Right. Okay. And yeah, thank you for that resource. I put that in the show notes as well. So that's behavioralsleep.org. So that's what I love about this conversation and talking with you too, is just the blending of the naturopathic treatments for sleep along with your medical training. And I personally think that's a great combination. We don't see enough of it, of the natural and Western medicine, so to speak. But sleep is just such a basic physiological function, like you said, quality of life issue. And so I think all of the resources and ways that we can improve it and talk about it is helpful, because it is one. Everybody knows that we need it. And we talk about life with, when you have a small child, your life kind of revolves around their sleep and their nap schedule. And yet as we get older and we still need that sleep as adults, and we don't take care of ourselves to give us the sleep that we need for various reasons. So I know part of my mindset shift was that I had to just give myself permission, like you said, setting those boundaries, but giving myself permission, like sleep is important and this isn't going to get done, or that, my sleep is more important than the kitchen counters being cleaned off one more time or stuff getting put away, to give myself permission to be able to do that.
Yes. Well, I think one of the decisions that people are making that they don't necessarily realize they're making is, do I want to have a long day or do I want to have a good day? Because if you are sacrificing your sleep to, if you need 8 hours, which gives a 16-hour day, but you're thinking, oh, I need to get a couple more hours of stuff done, expanding to an 18-hour day, but shrinking your sleep, that is pretty much a decision that your day is not going to be as good. Your energy is not going to be there. You're not going to feel happy. I mean, there's also research just about sleep and happiness. If you're not getting enough sleep or you have a sleep disorder, you're not feeling as happy. And there's just all of those ways that our quality of life suffers. So, I choose 16 hours of being more at the top of my game, mentally snappy, feeling energetic, feeling happy. And honestly, people are more productive when they, in the first 8 hours of their work versus the ninth hour and beyond. I think it's actually the workplace research shows that in the ninth hour on the job, you get like 15% done of what you got in the first hour. So it's really a myth that
Mhm.
staying up longer, you're going to get more done.
Yes, I would agree. And I think it's that, what's the word I want? Just attention, especially for taking care of all of the other people, taking care of the house, doing all of the things. But then you also want downtime. And so it's like, I know I need to go to sleep, but I also, maybe I want to watch my show or read my book or just have 45 minutes where nobody is talking to me and some of those things. And so I feel the struggle there too, and sometimes I find myself, well, it's like, "Oh, this is my time," but then it's creeping into my sleep time and finding that balance because it's like, I need both. How am I gonna do this today? And, but I like your, statement there about the quality of those hours as well too. If I'm not getting good enough sleep, is it really worth it? So, do I those extra 10 pages or finishing the chapter, the satisfaction I'm going to get from that is actually going to reduce my satisfaction tomorrow when I'm cranky. So,
Right.
or,
Yeah. And
or less awake.
yes, I've been a single mother, and I remember when my daughter was a teenager, she would go into her room and I would think that she was going to bed, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have like 45 minutes um until I go to bed and just have some time to myself. And recently she was home from college and she mentioned how when she was a teenager, if she came out and was like, oh, now I need to talk about that, I would mention, hey, this is my time. And, I have to reset my clock of the 45 minutes once you go to bed. And
Mhm.
so she even remembers me saying that because I totally get, you need to have some downtime. And so what I would encourage people to do in that case is to figure out like what is the feels like the most rewarding thing to do to have that personal time in that personal time, and how much time is kind of enough but minimal, right? Like you don't want to necessarily get into 2 hours of scrolling social media, which isn't gratifying. Maybe 45 minutes of reading a book that you enjoy, or 45 minutes of spa, bath, lotion, all of that, right? Self-care stuff. If that is what really is most effective for you, make sure that that happens. And that would be my recommendation.
We've talked a lot about adults, of course. And is there any distinction or things notable that are different for kids or teens with sleeping than for us as adults?
Sleep deprivation is actually more common in children and teens than it is in adults. So that's something I'd like to highlight. Children between the ages of 6 to 12, so kind of pre-pubertal children, need between 9 and 12 hours of sleep a night. So that is something to really make sure that your child is getting that amount of sleep. And I encourage parents at the end of a winter break or summer break or something, a time when your child was really able to get the sleep that they wanted to get just on their own schedule, notice how much that is. Because when I speak to students at high school health classes, they're generally probably 15 years old, and they're telling me that in the summer, they're getting a solid 10 or 11, sometimes some kids 12 hours of sleep. But then when they get into the school year, they don't get that much sleep and they suffer for it. So Younger kids, 9 to 12 hours. Teenagers need 8 to 10 hours a night. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is, we talked about the blue blocking glasses and the impact of blue light on our melatonin. Children's eyes and their circadian system is much more sensitive to the negative effects of light at night. And, particularly when we think about populations who have ADHD or autism, the blue blocking glasses for the kids, like if you've got 4 people in your household and you've got 2 pairs of blue blockers, I would have the kids wear them because it's going to help them feel drowsy and ready to go to sleep at the time that they need to go to sleep. And that's earlier than the adults. And so then the adults can wear them. But
Sure.
prioritize the children getting that low light for the hours before bed will make a huge difference, even more of a difference than it does for adults.
All right. That is great to know. And I, in my past life as a teacher, and that was just a constant struggle of teaching high school. And we had a very early start time of like 7:30, 7:40. And first hour was a disaster. I don't know. I'm nobody's awake. And of course they're sleep deprived and all of those things. So I could get on a soapbox all about school start time, but we won't go there. So yes, making sure our kids do that. And we're talking to teens, like I have 2 teens at home, and when you're talking in those health classes, is there anything that seems to resonate with them more? Because when they hear it from me about sleep's important, you need to get some sleep, they don't really care. They've either got other things to do or they're just not hearing it from me. Do you have any suggestions to help kids understand how important that sleep is?
Yeah, so I like to start the conversation with kids doing a little self-reflection or discussion of what is really important to them. Like what lights them up? What are they like authentically excited about? And for some kids, it might be academics, right? Maybe a smaller portion. Some kids are just really focus on their social life and their friendships. Other kids, maybe it's their sports or their hobby or something, right? And then with that identified interest, I like to relate their sleep back to that. Like, even if you have someone who's really focused on their friendships and maybe you've got some feelings or some judgments about, oh, they should be more focused on their academics, but that's just not what's real for them. Just having that conversation about, oh, have you noticed that you're more irritable and likely to say things you wish you hadn't when you're sleep deprived? Or if the person is the teen is dealing with a friend who is like shooting off their mouth and saying hurtful things, having that conversation of, oh, I was hearing about how sleep makes us more likely to behave that way. Do you think your friend is getting enough sleep? Right? And you're not focused necessarily on that individual teen, but you're helping build some insight, and sleep deprivation even shows in our face and increases the inflammation. So if you've got someone who's really concerned about their acne or their looks, right, that is something that sleep even plays a part there. And I think, teenagers are my favorite group to work with because they're just so emerging as themselves and trying out different ways of being in the world. And it's just such a important time for growth and individualism to emerge. And so that's how I start the conversation. And on the school start time issue, there is a wonderful nonprofit, startschoollater.net. You can find chapters in your area, and the recommendation is for middle schools and high schools to start no earlier than 8:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm. I get very passionate about that as a parent and as an educator, so I'm not even going to go there right now, but thank you for that resource. So thank you so much for this conversation. And how do you work with clients, and how can people find you if they want to hear more about sleep and getting better sleep?
Yeah, so I'm out on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Substack at Skilled Sleeper. So if you want to access daily tips on Instagram or deeper topics on YouTube or Substack, please join in the community. And then I have a series of online courses. And what really makes my courses unique and give a deeper value is that I've customized them for different populations. There's one that is specifically for families and talks about how sleep is going to change and the specific needs of people at different life stages. And then I have one for women. I've got one for shift workers. If you are doing shift work, about 20% of people they need specialized skills. And so that is a resource you can find at skilledsleeper.com.
All right. Well, thank you again. And I am grateful for this conversation and to be able to bring all this information to people. And hopefully there are at least one or two takeaways that our listeners can get from this, whether that's being able to have that phrase in your mind if you're overthinking the blue light glasses, maybe it's adjusting your bedding or the temperature in your room, but all of those things, because getting better sleep, like we said, it's a quality of life issue. It is going to help you with emotional regulation and balance as well, and with communication and your relationships. So thank you, Dr. Darley, and thank you for listening to this episode.
Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.